So, welcome back. We look forward to continuing today where we left off on page 178. In the center, pretty much the center of the page, the line begins Chayis, and the word where we left off is Proteahu, which we would continue Kikol, Shinui Tziruf, Huhar Kovas, Varigas Hakeiches, Chayis Bishinui. Literally translated, that every change of combination, an intermixing and interweaving of these forces, this energy, and this life stream, Bishinui is it changes based on the establishment of the word. So what are we talking about? So you got to go to the previous class. We should really invest all the time with the present information in the present class. It's really click away. We don't have to take, we've spoken about this so many times, we don't have to take much time to recap, and it's truly a second, maybe even less. And wherever you're watching this, but if it's always commendable to find this on the original website, which is tanyaonline.com, one word, tanyaonline.com, and you have all the previous classes set up, all the previous classes in Shayich V'Emunah, even on Likutei Amorim, whereby we were Zeicha, we merited to learn and conclude. But in Shayich V'Emunah, it's the final chapter, which is chapter 12. And you can see, I believe this is, we had already a few classes on this, but you can see the very latest class to see the connection of today's class to today's information. I did mention time and again the advantage of this particular website, just because, in other words, wherever you're watching, but it's, to see it also, to be able to access the previous classes. And comes up also, there's the advantage, the text comes up in a separate scroll bar, as such easy to follow. So it's extremely easy to access the previous class. So really we should, without any introduction, just go on. But as you know by now, I just can't do that. So we go on, we're just going to, again, so just even this, the last part of it. So the Alter Rebbe points out different Berakim, pretty much a summary of all the previous 11 chapters. And we spoke about this unique style of summary of the Alter Rebbe, so detailed and so articulate, which is, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's a kind of, the Rebbe points this out also, it's a kind of similar to Sefer Yetzirah type of presentation over here, but the Alter Rebbe had a very precise goal over here, or his goal was extremely precise, and as such, this culmination of all of the Shayich V'Emunah was of the maximum precision, because at the end of the day, the Alter Rebbe wanted, you should find the godly reality, not just in an overall manner, but in a very detailed manner, meaning to say that when you're dealing with the very nitty-gritty of every single day-to-day occupations and involvements, you should find the godly reality. And what level of the godly reality? Like the Rebbe has the famous conclusion and a summary of the Shayich V'Emunah, that Alter Rebbe starts with the Dvar Hashem, which is this Asar Mamoris, which is embedded and vitalizes and vivifies every part of creation. But ultimately, the Alter Rebbe's point was to tell that even the Dvar Hashem is part of the core essence of Hashem. So in essence, wherever you look, this is the entire godly reality which you're dealing in front of you. It'd be very, I'm not going to go into the whole thing over here, but if you, maybe we'll be able to post it also, perhaps we'll try to post it, the Rebbe's explanation, unique explanation as a summary of these chapters. And that's where the Alter Rebbe goes into details also, connecting this to this, what the Rebbe points out. The Alter Rebbe goes into detail over here in the very last chapter, which on the surface, pretty much you would say, from chapter 11, the Alter Rebbe already landed in Asar Mamor, is quite articulate and quite detailed. No, the Alter Rebbe goes on and begins Yud Beis in that, and continues with Yud Beis in that very fashion, and again with another notch and another fold in this dimension, for this very reason mentioned, just noted above. So the Alter Rebbe speaks about the seven Rikim, 7 heavens. And then he mentions that all the 7 heavens, on the overall, they are vitalized with the word, in other words, their chayas, their vitality and energy comes through the word Yirakia. more specifically is with the names that they're called. If it's shchokim, machain, again, you got to see the previous class or classes to appreciate this wordage over here, machain, shchokim. These are names of the certain rakim. They also get their chayas, their life and energy also from that specific name. But in the overall sense, they get their chayas from the hierarchy, then also from the shchokim. And then I'll tell you right that everyone, the Prate Habruim, we concluded the last class, the details of creation with these 7 Rakim. Nivra Kol Pratmeim, every one was created, V'chai, V'kayim, and is alive and in existence, Mi'ez, Etziro, V'es, and Tevizelu, from a particular combination, substitution, transposition, which is based on the chayis of that particular individual, specific creation. And here the Alter Rebbe begins today, he calls Shinui Tziruf, because every change of combination is a intermixture, an interweaving of different energies, Bishinui, again, with a change, and the smallest change, right? You could have, for example, a few colors. The question is, how much of the red you're going to put in, how much of the blue you're going to put in, what you're going to put in first. The first, not necessarily with color matters, but in other areas it does matter. What comes first takes precedent, has a sense of a superiority over what comes later, thereafter. Even colors, how much of you're going to put in the red and the blue and the yellow and the amount, even though you can't say, well, it's red, blue, and yellow, it all should come out the same. No, it won't come out the same if you have different measurements. How much you're going to put in from the red, from the blue, and from the yellow. You're going to mix it all together, it'll come out a distinct color. And so too, the Alter Rebbe says there's all different changes, because every change of combination and intermixing and interweaving of these keiches will definitely change the reality of that nivra, of that created entity which is created. And we did point out the other day, sometimes you have the same message through numerical value, but nonetheless it's concealed. It doesn't come out overtly as something that is, you have the idea, the message there itself in a very manifest manner. For example, we give them example, you come to paper, it says Baruch. Baruch means blessed. Let's say your name is Baruch, it even has such more relevance to you. And then you have, which we mentioned, that Baruch was 228, then you have some other word that doesn't have a Beis Reish Vav or neither Chaf, but it all leads up to the same numerical value of 228. So look at it and they say, is there a connection between the word Baruch or your name, let's say, if your name is Baruch? No, not really. I don't see any message of blessed. Oh, and then you start looking and say, oh, yes, there is some message which carries the energy of blessing because it has the same numerology of 228. So you see, because the interchanging of letters, the energy doesn't come out in such a revealed, manifest manner as if it comes out when it's just all clear. And then again, that's what he says. Every interchange, every substitution, and every transposition with these letters in different configurations, it carries another type of energy, and as such, the creation, which would come as a result and be vitalized with that very combination and mixture of energy which exists in the letters, will come out distinct, will be created distinct. We mentioned the other day what was so great about Adam Arishan. The Medrash tells us that Adam Arishan, the greatness of Adam Arishan, that he was able to give a name Shayr and Chamayr to the animals. Hashem called all the creations to Adam Arishan, and he said Lazenikro, this is appropriate to call this Shayr and ox, and this is Chamayr and donkey, and other names, again based on the types of creations which were brought in front of Adam Arishan. In other words, he was able, and as opposed to the Malachim couldn't do it, the Medrash tells us Hashem and brought all these creations in front of the Malachim, and Malachim could not do it, Adam Arishan could have, and this was the greatness of Adam Arishan. Like, what's so special of calling names? You got to give it a name, and even in every language, this is a name, and that's a name, and how many street names do you have? But, there's certain people came up with it. Is there wisdom to it? Yeah, probably there is. Try to figure out an incident, a particular history about an individual, or a time in in historical time. There's always, you have to put your mind to even call a name a street name, and how much more so you're talking about Hashem's creation. Any type of, you want to establish a language, these names will be there for perpetuity. So there's some wisdom, understandably so, but we mentioned that there's nothing intrinsic. All the other languages, it's Hashem Heskemi, meaning there's nothing intrinsic, the name with this, which the name is called. Not at all. It's only extrinsic connection, and therefore, yeah, a bit of wisdom. But nonetheless, it's not that you're able to figure out. There's nothing in the chair which would be called chair more than table. And theoretically, the chair could have been called table, the table could have been called chair. It wouldn't be an issue. But when it comes to Lashon HaKodesh, it's the energy which is vitalizing that creation that has a combination that has a certain energy based on the letters and the configuration of the letters, the setup of the letters, what comes first, what letter comes first, as we mentioned. The first letter, the Alter Rebbe is going to say it over here also, it reigns supreme. It has superiority over the other letters. In other words, the first letter has a dominating energy, where even that it follows with other letters, and as such the configuration of that energy, it changes as such because there's so many more letters, or there's more letters to the word. Nonetheless, the first one has a certain sense of its energy dominates, and as such the created being which comes out of this particular word, which is the name of that creation, ultimately carries a bit more of the first letter, but that would be the image of the creation, which would come precisely with those words and precisely with the presentation or the setup and the order of those words as well. And that's what the Medrash says, Adam Rishon, this is the greatness of Adam Rishon, which Malachim couldn't do, because he saw the energy of the Sher, and he saw how the energy Shin, Vav, Reish, is the energy which is Mahav, and Mechayim, Mekayim, which gives life and existence to that ox, and therefore Noel Likra Sher. And had the Vav come before the Shin, even with the same letters, or let's a step before, if they had different letters, there wouldn't be an ox created. When you looked at the ox, you saw it's exactly the energy which is in the Shin and the Vav and the Reish, and in that order. Not Vav Shin Reish or Reish Vav Shin. Precisely the Shin first letter is, again, the first letter has a certain dominating force. In other words, it's the potency of the letter reigns supreme over all the other letters in that very configuration, that very name. And then, in this case, is the Vav there after the Shin and the Reish, and there is created an ox, exactly with the nature, the makeup, the character, everything we know about the ox comes from that energy, Shin Vav Reish. So Adam Rishon was able to figure out, he was able to understand in these letters what they represent, and as such, he declared, and so on, because of the intrinsic connection of creation with these letters, which are Mahava, Machai, Mikayim, which bring creation into being. Because everyone becomes first, not only the first letter, actually. Not only the first, whatever comes before. If you have, let's say, even this small word of Shire, if you have a bigger, larger word, every letter which comes first has a certain superiority over the subsequent letter. And how much more the first one, because it's the first in the name. And this is the main energy in that creation. And the rest are secondary to it. And they're included in that light which emanates from the first letter or the previous letter, and so on and so forth, till the very first letter of that name, which carries the most of the energy. And through this particular configuration and combination, as an example, there is a new creation comes to being. And so too, this in the interchanging of letters. We mentioned there's different ways, even according to Torah, where these letters interchange. As an example, we gave the example, Adbash is one of the ways that these letters interchange. Adbash, as you see, the Aleph corresponds the first letter to the last letter, Tuf. The Beis to the Shin, the Gimel to the Reish, and so on and so forth, right? From the front and the back coming inwards. So when you see something with Aleph and Beis and Gimel, let's say there would be some word, and as such a creation of the Aleph Beis Gimel, and then you have the Tov and the Shin and the Reish. You say, well, in the Chilufim, it's one represents the other, they interchange, so the creation ought to be the same. No, they're not the same, because here you have Aleph Beis Gimel, and you have the Chiluf, just the kind of second generation, or not second generation, but kind of the message of Aleph Beis Gimel is concealed. It's not that manifest because it's represented through a Chiluf, through an interchanging energy, which comes through the Shin, the Shin, the Tov and the Shin and the Reish. And the Reish is an example. Does it have a similarity? Of course it has a similarity, because that's the At, Bash, and Gar, and so on, because they are interchanging words. But to say that the creation would be the exact same, of course not. So it would be a different type of creation, because it's a chiluf of Isis. So you have the image, the icon is Asara Mamoris, the 10 sayings in the Torah, and each one, it's all a combination of the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis, which each one has this atomic energy and beyond. Like atomic energy is something which is kind of infinite in our mind, our finite mind. The kind of this beyond disproportionate energy. We think about atomic energy, but it's beyond it, because atomic energy is also part of creation, which creation is by definition a limited creation. Limitlessness doesn't exist really within creation. Yeah, in our Avodas Hashem, because we connect to the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is so why Avodas Hashem is so unique. We're able to lift ourselves from a state, a state in a spirit of finitude, and elevate ourselves to true infinity. Every mitzvah, every learning Torah, every minig, every D'Rabbanan, we're connecting to the Ein Sof, reality of Ein Sof. But within Olam, there is nothing which is infinite. But in our minds, this is something disproportionate. So atomic energy is just an example, just to understand what exists within every single letter. But it's beyond that, because we're talking about true infinite energy coming from an infinite God. So you have the Asara Mamoris as an icon, the 22 letters, but then they interchange, and that's why we see the multitude of creations within even our creation, Elam Hazeh Agashmi, in the millions, billions, and trillions. And the question is, like, where does that come from, and where does that come from, and where does the like, we don't see that in the first parsha of Bereshis, that Hashem created this, and we have so many different species, or rather different creations, even in the world of the botanical world, in the animal world, in the animal kingdom, and then even in the inanimate. And we say, whoa, I didn't see this in Bereshis. It's the first portion of Bereshis where Hashem divulges and presents the whole reality of creation. Why isn't it there? Wasn't everything created then? And the answer is, yeah, everything was created then, but again, you have the Asar Mamoris, and then you have the Chilufim, and the Tmuras, and the interchanges, and the combinations, and different configurations, and transpositions, and you have the substitutions of all these different energies which exist within all the letters, and then you have different creations which come to being. And again, even sometimes the same exact letters. What comes first in the word that carries an overweighing or a dominating force, because it's a letter in that very name which is prior to the letter after. It has a certain dominance, and then the first letter. So even the same words, or the same letters rather, but nonetheless in a different setup, would produce a different type of creation. And you have it again, the more away from the energy of the iconic Asar Mamoris, the lower the type of creation, lower in status, and lower to its overt connection with the creations or with the energy of Asar Mamoris. Because again, the more you conceal the iconic image of the Asar Mamoris, of the 10 sayings, the lower, the more inferior creation would come about. That's what he says, Nivrois, Bris Chadoshes, Pchusi Hamayla Be'erech, in comparison to the Nivroim, to those creations which come Ha'esius Atzman, from the original letters itself. The quality of the creation which comes from the original letter itself. There you have the entire potency of the Chabez Esis, and again, from the original setup, as opposed to the way they come through, the Chilufim, Tzmures, and Chilufim, Tmuris, and Tzirufim, right? These combinations, substitutions and transpositions and different configurations, which are created a kind of second generation, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, and seventh, and there's no end if you think about it. And Rebbe gives a mashal, came derech mashal, dugma seir amir balayla ba'oretz minei yereyach, similar to the light which shines at night on planet Earth from the moon. The moon has its own light? We know it does not have its own light. The light of the moon, is a reflection from the sun. So someone's going to say, yeah, the sun, day, night, it's always light. We're always getting the light from the sun. And we indeed are, because the moon, the light of the moon, which shines as well upon Earth, and it illuminates a little bit, as we know, also comes from the sun. So the sun is always shining, and never saw the difference between really day and night, because day is we have the light from the sun, and the night we also have light from the sun. It's absurd to equate the two. Understandably so, because when you have the sunshine, it's bright, it's light, it's warm, it's a different dynamic. At night, it's dark. Yeah, you have a bit of the light of the sun, but the sun is coming through second generation. It's reflecting off the moon. So no one would ever say that, it's all the same, because in the end of the day, it's the sunlight. Sure, it's the sunlight. Sure, everything begins within the Asar Mamoris, the iconic Asar Mamoris, where you have all the energy, the infinite energy existing in the Asar Mamoris. That's the way the Torah presented this configuration, exactly with those wordings, whatever was created from the Asar Mamoris, similar to the sun. But then you have the second generation and third, and you're not going to expect that the creation, which comes through the different combination and transpositions and different configurations, which come from that from the Asar, iconic Asar Mamoris, the creation should be the same because it's all stemming from the Asar Mamoris. No. Not at all. We can all appreciate that there's a difference. You have the same source, the same sun, but at night it's dark because you have some sunshine coming through the moon. It's just reflecting of the moon. So it's another generation, so to say, of the sunlight. And as such, it's dark and it's really not the same. And so even though the source is truly one. And so to over here, you have the Asar Memories, the way they were presented in the Torah, and everything comes through the Chilufim and Tmuris and Tziruf V'Yetz, and everything is, and again, one level after the other. It's not, here in this example, it's, the Alter Rebbe says one generation, so to say, the moon, but there's no real end if you think about it. How many ways that these very letters can interchange. And as such, the creation which come from them is definitely a lower, inferior level of creation. As Alter Rebbe continues, the light which shines at night on land, from the moon. The sun of the light of the moon is also from the sun. So the light which is on the earth, it's the light of the sun. This sun is nowhere to be seen in front of our eyes, in the place where we are. The side of the world we live in, the sun is not to be seen. Yes, you have a reflection of the sun on the moon, which is Meir, also shines upon us, but nonetheless, it's Eir ha'Eir shel HaShemesh, is the light of the sun. And the Koch HaMamish Derech Mashal, so too, the Eisish Mamoris, the letters which are in the original Mamoris, which Hashem created the world. He calls them This is the overall drawing of energy and light from and light and energy from Hashem's midas. Like we explained before in the previous chapter, that this comes from midas, this das, and then there's the midas, which is Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach Heidi Seid, and then Malchus, which is the Isius Malchus Pez. We explained at length the connection of Malchus, and there's that final midah, which is the Isius Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh, and so on. The way it is lahavdil by the person, and the way it is by starting from the way it is by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We mentioned many times the way it is by a person comes from the fact that it's on high. Not to go into it now. So the chayis from the Asar Mamoris comes from Hashem's midas. Again, we explained this in length in Ches, Tes, and Yud, and so on. Before that, Livrei ha'elun ismail liyesh, to create the world from a state of ayin to a state of yesh. Ex nihilo, meaning to say from the ayin, these transcendent, to the yesh, to making it the way it is, this physical elam hazeh gashmi. Lachiyos and l'kayim, to give it life and give it existence. Kol's mamash ritzeni's baruch is long, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in mind to vitalize creation. In other words, the establishment creation should continue to be and exist. Generally, the world was created for 6,000 years. And the seventh year is different ideas and examples. The Rebbe writes, and to give it life, calls men mashach, calls men mashach ritzeni, as long as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire that this elam, the world should exist. And from this overall amshacha, and from this overall ha'ara, Heyir Hashem, in other words, this extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Heyir Hashem imshach mimenu, till they say the Keitzav HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to shine, and it continues to draw light from there, but again, till they say the offsprings of the Keitzav, and similar, like we said, the light of the moon is an offspring of the light of the sun, Vanofel, and its branches, which is, again, you have the chunk of the tree, and then you have the branches, which is, again, a second extension from the core of the tree, and so on, so too. You have the Asar Mamoris, and then you have this, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to extend its offsprings, its branches, which is Telos Vamshach Za'ir Aisius, which are the offsprings and the drawing and the evolving of the light from the original letters. The hein chalufiyes Tmurisei, and this is the interchanging forces of the letters and their combinations and their substitutions. And he created through this, again, through this extension, detailed creation within every world. And then it doesn't stop there. And then Hashem extended himself and shines even more, meaning say more means to say an additional extension of, again, vertical, if you will, vertically. Hashem, the next generation, then he draws and he descends. It starts one, and then the next, and then the next, which is again a third generation from the light and shine of the letters, as we could only imagine. Imagine you have the Adbash, right? Aleph, Tav, to Beis, to Shin, Gimel, the Reish, and so on. And then you have these very three letters. Let's say the numerical value of Shin, Tav, and Shin and Reish is 900. And then, as an example, you bring in different letters which has the same numerical value as 900. Does Aleph Beis Gimel come close to 900? No, actually Aleph Beis Gimel is 6. And here you have 900. So you have another combination of 900 because it's supposed to reflect the Tav and the Shin and the Reish, which is already a reflection. It's already a second generation because it's a chiluf of the Aleph Beis Gimel. So that other word, which is Nora Tav, Nora Shin, Nora Reish, but it ends up being the numerical value of 900, certainly is connected to the Tav and the Shin and the Reish, which comes and stems from the Aleph, the Beis, the Gimel. So it's already a second generation, a third generation, if you will. And then it goes on because that same word has another similarity to another type of combination. Maybe even the same atbash or any other ways. We spoke about the other day, if you remember, that every five, there's a group, the letters are grouped based on the instruments where the letters are pronounced from. For example, we said the throat, it's brought in a number of places. If you'd say to the throat, the lips, the tongue, and so on and so forth, where these letters stem from, and they're also grouped together. So in that next generation, so to say, extension, evolvement of that energy, which is from the Tav, Shin, the Reish, which we said is just a numerical value. You have something, other letters, which, for example, which are a combination based on the Adbash, or these letters which interchange because they come from the same source. In other words, represented or pronounced from the same instrument, as an example. Yes, so they have a connection. They have a connection to that numerical value, which has a connection to the Tav, Shin, Reish, which has a connection to the Aleph, Beis, Gimel. So it's already third and fourth generation. And as such, the creations which come from there, and sometimes even the same letters, what stands first in the letter, as we explained. So then, as such, a different type of creation will be created. So you look at that creation, it's stemming from and from one level to another, till its initial iconic image of the Asar Mamoris, but it's so many extensions away. And the Alter Rebbe again, the Alter Rebbe doesn't stop by ha'ara, de ha'ara, de ha'ara. He goes on, because we can all appreciate, when you're talking about these letters and the energy which exists in these letters, so many different, we can't even wrap our mind how many letters and how many configurations and how many setups of these letters and the chilufim, tmuris, and tzirufim, right? It really, there is no end. If we just think about it, we put our minds to it, we realize there is no end. So the Rebbe doesn't stop by the ha'ara, the ha'ara, the ha'ara. He just to the extent that the inanimate was created. And why is this to the extent? Stone is something pretty common, but do we have the word stone, Evan, in the Torah? No, we don't. And you can appreciate also avonim, ofor, stones, earth. You don't look at it as like something alive, receiving its energy from something, and as opposed to, for example, you think about even in the animal world, the animal kingdom, something is moving, something is running, coming, aggressive, less aggressive, more aggressive. You see something is happening over here, and you say, "Well, this is a lot of life and energy which is being presented right over here in front of my eyes. I'm experiencing something very interesting, and where is it coming from? Oh, Hashem is right now giving that creation its life and its existence, and as such, you see all that movement, you see the vitality, you see the chayis, you see the energy in front of your eyes, in a manifest presentation of energy. But you look at the stone, you look at earth, this is like, you don't even appreciate that there's even energy coming through the stone, because that's the point. It's inanimate, it's lifeless, it's not moving, it doesn't grow. That same stone was there 1,000 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but I know from the beginning when I was born, I always turned the block and I saw that stone for decades. It didn't grow. It's the same place, and I don't see any life and vitality, and it doesn't seem anything like that. The earth, similar. And I know that stone was there for 1,000 years, pictures, hundreds of years, many centuries ago. Same stone, same place, and it was there probably 1,000 years. It was there right from the beginning of creation. So there's energy, flowing energy into that, through that stone. Really, just was created by 6 days of creation and just exists and is just there. So Rebbe says no. There's nothing is just there. This is again based on the very beginning of the Shaykh V'Emunah, that every dvar of Chaim V'Kayom, Hashem's energy continues to vitalize every part of creation. And based on the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem will pull back that creation, everything would cease to exist on the moment, not break apart, decay, deform, and so on. No, it would literally disappear, because only dvarav chayim kayamim. In other words, la'olam Hashem dvar chanitza b'shamayim. Rather, it's a similar idea, but namely that Hashem's dvar that stands in heaven, if it's the rakia. But in the end, not only the rakia, which is mentioned as Saramar, is a supreme creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but all these creations which ultimately come from the extension and the involvement of the Hashem's original manifestation, the Asar Mamoris, are also receiving right now their life and energy from the energy of the Asar Mamoris, and Hashem pulls back on that very stone that you saw for the last few decades. And you know it was there for centuries, and you pretty much believe that it was there in the same spot from the beginning of the creation, will disappear literally. And if the offer, you say, well, I don't see no energy, it's irrelevant, because the only reason why they exist is because the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is right now Mahava Mechai Mekayim. The fact that they're lifeless is because they're after so many extensions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy. And as such, it was so much minimized to the extent that you look at the Eben and you don't see any life and you don't see any energy, and so to the offer. And the Shmeisei and Eben v'Ofar, these names, their very names, stone and earth, and this is the reason why they're lifeless, because it starts from Asar Mamoris, but that word Even, Aleph, Vez, Nun, the Vez following the Aleph, and the Nun, Safit following the Vez, and so to the Ofer, the Ayin, the Fei, and the Resh, and that setup, and that image, and that configuration. That's the reason why the Eben, the stone, looks like that, and the Ofer and the earth looks like that. But nonetheless, the reason why it's lifeless is because it's an extension of so many generations from the Asorim Amores, which all this could come from Asorim Amores. These are the supreme creations. No one's going to ever compare the sun, which is an enormous creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to earth and stones, which are on the surface seem lifeless. We know they're not lifeless, but nonetheless, the reason why they are created in this inanimate manner, and they are inanimate, is because their names, Even va'Avar, are changes and intercombinations of intercombinations. We mentioned before, it could be, we gave the example before, one connected to the other. You could always find the connection to the previous level, but nonetheless, the message is so much more concealed and condensed and so on. And as such, the creation which comes about is created in the same fashion and appears in the same manner. Nishlam Chelik Sheni. We merited to conclude the entire Shayich Emunah. The Ezras Hashem Yisbarach V'Yisala, with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. May he be blessed and may he be exalted. As we mentioned, we're going to try to post the Rebbe's summary on the website as well, to understand what the Rebbe is saying. In the end of the day, that everything we see in front of our eyes is just a manifestation of the godly reality. And not only the manifestation of the Dvar Hashem, which is the inferior dimension within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Asar Mamoris, but within the Asar Mamoris, because everything is really batal, Kiziv Hashemesh B'Shemesh, like the Rebbe explains in the third chapter of Sha'ar Yichud, and everything is, in the end of the day, part of the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which tells us that everything we see in front of our eyes are really an expression or a manifestation of the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we take a sit and we say Baruch Atah Hashem, or every idea that we encounter throughout our 24 hours, we realize we're within the reality, within the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, not only the Asar Mamaris. And again, there's so much more to talk about as a conclusion of Shayich Emunah, but I believe you would find it in that summary of the Rebbe, which brings such clarity and such perspective to the ultimate core message of Shayich Emunah. Have a wonderful evening.